Good evening, everybody, and welcome here to the penultimate race of the season for the BackFire Sim Racing. Here under the lights at the D-shaped mile-and-a-half Kentucky Speedway. This is the track that's going to determine the final four heading into Homestead next week. I'm Seth Cole alongside of Scott Rankin here for the First Page Media 200. And Scott, we saw Talladega kind of play its part last week at Iowa. I think played the biggest part, and it set the table here tonight for drivers to make a last-ditch effort to either clinch their Final Four position or maybe race their way into the Final Four spot next week.
Well, a couple things like coming out of Talladega was obviously, you kind of don't want super speedways, the question mark that they throw up, and then if anything, it altered the driver behavior quite excessively, for my mind, at Iowa last week. We saw, I mean, it's short track racing. You're always going to get tempers, but the tempers, I don't necessarily flared directly. I don't think I heard anyone speak a bad word or, get really upset. What actually happened was that the drivers were driving, for me, be a little bit beyond their abilities and those sorts of things. So that's kind of what happened. It all broke down, and hey, it's now in the history books, and there's now a lot of drivers with a lot to do.
18 drivers going to take the green flag here tonight, so it pretty much puts into perspective who's going to have a shot at those Final Four positions. We'll talk about that in just a moment, as we're now going to go down for our invocation, courtesy of Pastor Zach Woods.
Let us pray. Almighty God, tonight we are just so thankful for technology like this that exists where we can meet new friends and do this the right way. And so, Lord, I pray tonight that you grant the drivers patience and wisdom as we maneuver through Kentucky tonight. And Lord, just let us have fun. And we pray all of this in Jesus' name. Amen.
And let's now stand by for tonight's singing of the national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars
.135 laps here under the lights as we take a look at tonight's starting lineup. Matthew Robinson trying to go a perfect 3 for 3 here in the playoffs. He won at Talladega. He won last week at Iowa. I mean, obviously we know he's going to make it into the Final Four, but, I asked him last week, and I'll let you kind of get your opinion on this, Scott, the fact that if he goes 3 for 3 here tonight, it could very well just be a statement win of, hey, when we get to Homestead next week, this is numero uno. This is the guy you got to go through to clinch that championship.
The guy can have a horrid night out tonight. He scrapes through the playoff. He's still, in my mind, based upon the point standings, the way that everything's run over the last few weeks, perfectly honestly, Matthew Robinson's the guy you got to beat, hands down. I don't even think that anyone's competing with him at the moment. The guy's consistency is on par. If you show up next week and you don't have a phenomenal night, he takes the championship, in my mind.
Well, Robinson's going to lead us to the green flag here this evening. It's the last mile and a half before we get to Homestead. James Cato to his outside. We've talked about James Cato down the home stretch of the regular season and here into the playoffs, been one of the strongest non-playoff contenders. Those two going to be side by side going through 1 and 2. Robinson should have the advantage down this back straightaway. Mention the fact that there are 18 drivers that are going to take the green. 17 officially cross the line here to start off this race. And look at him fan out 3 wide. That's the 43 of Ryan Phillips almost to the green wall in 3.
Yeah, I think they're just searching for just like a little bit of where am I running? How do I feel? What does everyone around me look like at this sort of stage? You know, obviously everyone's got their own sort of lines and how they're feeling right now, but ultimately, how does the car feel? How does the car handle in traffic? How does that air sort of affect everything that's really going on? So,
Cato under fire from Robinson for the lead. Battle for third between teammates Jeremy Richmond, the 98, the 96 of DJ Daniel. Daniel is a driver that is currently in a Final Four position, but he's the one that everyone's gunning for. Didn't have the best of runs last week, ran into some issues late, and finished, I believe, was outside of the top 15 as a result. He's only 7 points ahead of 5th in the standings, and that would be the 78 of J.R. Miller. But as we saw there on our grid, Miller didn't have the best of qualifying results, starting all the way back from the 14th position, so he's got some work to do. Right now, he and Zach Woods might be the only 2 drivers mathematically tonight that could move their way into a Final Four position. Miller -7 and Woods -11, but they're going to have a lot of help. They're going to have that 96 run into issues plenty here tonight, and with a track where they're going to get somewhat spaced out, kind of as our usual mile-and-a-half type race, that might be a little bit too late for both of those drivers.
yeah. I mean, look, to be perfectly honest, they needed a big grid tonight. They needed 30, 40 cars, and they needed to have guys at the back that were going to come through and beat the likes of the guy. Honestly, it's the first time that I can actually sit here and recall looking at a field and going, I think these guys are all locked in. Every single one of them's locked in, right? Because up until now, normally when you come across a field like this, you're like, none of this is locked in. It's a playoff race. Anyone can really get in there. But remember that this is not a win-and-in style playoff system. This is a point you have to point your way in. So just because Matthew Robinson's had phenomenal races the last couple times, he's not locked in. He's locked in because of the point scenario.
Right now, you've got 2 non-playoff drivers up inside of the top 5. You're looking at one of them right there, the 73 of Patrick Mcquaid. Running a little high there through 1 and 2, trying to get around DJ Daniel, and will do so. He's also got another non-playoff contender, TJ Roberts, right behind him. Now, in terms of the drivers that have a shot of getting in here tonight, talk about the drivers that already look like they're either locked in or could fall out. Robinson, as we mentioned, 2 for 2 here in the playoffs, 25 points ahead of 4th in the standings where DJ Daniel currently sits, so he's locked in. No questions asked. He is, 8 points to the good of even if we had 8 drivers in the field here tonight. So he's locked in. Christopher Lawrence, our winner from the second Daytona race, he's 11 points ahead of the cut line. So pretty much as long as he stays up inside the top 10, he should be safe. And Corey Saucier, who had that good run last week, finished up inside the podium. He's 7 points ahead of the cut line where DJ Daniel sits. So maybe for that 24, what are we looking? Maybe a top 5 run clinches him a spot in the Final Four, but I don't see him on the grid. So this is interesting because he was 25 points ahead of Miller. I think even tonight, even if he got last place points, he would still make it in.
It'd be close, wouldn't it? I mean, you know, it's really tough. So you got to remember, Saucier's 18 points off the leader, so he's 7 back to Daniel, and then another 7. So he's effectively 14 points ahead of Miller. So Miller needs to beat him by 14 points. Now, there's a good opportunity for Miller to be able to do that tonight, but again, Miller's going to have a consistent, a clean night, and he will need to beat. Will have to have a great night compared to Zachary Woods. Otherwise, Zachary Woods, with 4 points of the goods, can point his way in. So there's a fair few drivers with Saucier not in the field that all of a sudden have that opportunity.
Yeah, right now, Daniel can only be passed by Miller and Woods. Saucier can only be passed by Miller. And you bring up that point there of having to gain 14 points on Saucier. He actually would have to gain 15 points to make sure it's not a tie between himself and Corey Saucier. So right now, on my projection, he would have to finish up inside of the top 2 here tonight in order to achieve that, or at least if he led a lap, if they got the bonus point for a lap led, he would have to finish up inside of the podium.
Yeah, so look, I mean, options, right? He's got to be right up there, and he's got to be right on his game tonight so far. And for my liking, I mean, in the early phases, he's not. Maybe he's just looking after those tires. Maybe he's just trying to keep that pace up. He's running right at the back end of the pack. And I mean, gap to the leader is starting to build as well. So he's, 5 seconds back off the race lead at this point in time? Basically 4 seconds off where he would need to finish. So he's really going to show a ton of speed. Having said that, in the final stages of Iowa, like if there was one guy in the field that I thought might have a shot at taking something away, it was actually Miller. And unfortunately, circumstances played out and didn't run his way, such is life. But he looks very strong in the dying stages at Iowa. So whether or not he's going to come out here tonight and do the exact same thing, have just sort of a quiet early couple phases of the race, and then all of a sudden turn it on in the back end, who knows?
Yeah, it could be, 2 different tracks, 2 different mentalities. Aggressive at the short track. We saw him up in the top 5 pretty much the entirety of the night. Never really fell back at all. Here at the mile and a half, where we're seeing them settle into a nice long green flag run, could be a strategy call there on the 78, trying to preserve his tires a little bit more for the long run, maybe make a charge later on in this run when everybody else's grip starts to go away, or it could also be a case of he know in the situation he has to finish up in the podium, and he's making sure he preserves that race car until the very end. So it'll be interesting to see how that one plays out. The guy that's on the move right now is Patrick Mcquaid in that 73. He's picked up 3 spots since the drop of the green flag, cracked the top 5, and now hounding Matthew Robinson for 2nd place.
Yeah, what a drive from him. I mean, admittedly, if we're going to talk about this racetrack, due to the changes, the racetrack these days is pretty much wide open. The new cup package, this is how it handles. It'll be interesting, actually really, really interesting to see the next gen cars get down here next season and see what they can really do, because I have a feeling they'll probably be pretty much the same, just with the nature of the racetrack. So obviously it's pretty similar to most of your D-shaped mile and a halves. High lane is going to keep you a little bit more tire, save you a little bit more momentum. It's going to be a little bit more fuel intensive. The fastest line's all the way at the bottom of the racetrack. So Patrick McQuaid's clearly found something, found some consistency. But I tell you what, James Cato leading us away, he would be ruining the fact that he didn't put enough rounds in to qualify for the playoffs, because he would be the guy that is taking it to Matthew Robinson this whole way.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I've said this before, I'll say it again. If Cato ran the full season with the way that he was dominating near the end of the regular season, no doubt he would be into the playoffs and more than likely would be in the Final Four next week at Homestead with a championship on the line, as we're watching the battle here for 6th place. Ryan Phillips to the inside of DJ Daniel. Now, Daniel has actually been going the wrong way since we started this race. Started up in 4th and has now dropped back to 6th. Now under fire from both Phillips and Josh Anderson. And it's interesting, too, because you talk about the way that this playoff format is. 4 races, 3 races to qualify into Homestead, and it's not a win-you're-in situation. It just whittles the field down from 16 to 4 drivers. And there's a lot of guys out here that still have that bright neon green playoff banner, spoiler, and splitter that kind of fall into the same category as those guys that are out there without the playoff banners. Guys like Kyle Gartner, Noah Owens, Jeremy Richmond, Angel Santiago, as well as Ryan Phillips. I mean, these are guys that are just trying to finish out the season with a W now. They're pretty much mathematically out of the hunt of making it into the championship hunt next week at Homestead.
I mean, you can say that they're theoretically out of the championship hunt. Just because they're out of the championship hunt means absolutely nothing about each race. I mean, even if you are in a championship race, like, all it does is it just adds this little bit of caution, this little bit of preservation to what you should already be doing anyway, because you're already going to be coming out trying to put together a fast package, make sure that you're right there, and then things sort of decide themselves quite naturally. But a lot of these guys now, they get to throw that a little bit out the window, and get to put their head down and again go back to focusing on racing. And at the end of tonight, they'll sit down, they'll review their season, and they'll go, what could have been, where did we go wrong? But look, there's the alternative option here is that they could just go out, have a blistering run, fall just short, and be agonized about what didn't they do tonight. But you got to remember that the way that things stand, it goes back to Talladega. the last phase of the playoffs, it really rings true just what you needed to do back at Talladega. Because if you had a bad run at Talladega, you had to have perfect runs at the next two racetracks, and a lot of the guys last week did not have a clean run at Iowa, shall we say, is probably the right way to go with it. I'm actually going to refer back to what our pastor said during the pre-race stuff as well. You know, patience. Patience was what the drivers needed to utilize, what they really needed to run through, running around at Iowa. A lot of the guys didn't do that, and they're no longer in position to compete for a championship. And the only thing I can say to those guys is, look, I mean, you made the mistake. Write it down, take a note of it, and make sure that you put that in the book for next week. Next season, sorry.
Almost wondering too if the fact that Talladega got moved from second playoff race up to first playoff race, it changed the approach the drivers had to Iowa last week as well. If you didn't have a good run at Talladega, you might have gone into desperation mode of, okay, I have to perform here at Iowa to make sure that I put myself in a comfortable situation when we get to Kentucky the following week. And that might have been what led to what were some pretty aggressive restarts the entirety of that night, as looking here at a good battle for 5th on back to 8th with Richmond, Daniel, Phillips, and Anderson. We checked back on the 9 of Christopher Lawrence just a moment ago, keeping an eye on where he's running. Again, he just has to finish up inside the top 10. He would lock himself into the Final Four. Matthew Robinson's already locked in. The other drivers that we're keeping an eye on, though, neither one of them making up a whole lot of ground. We saw J.R. Miller still back there in 15th, and there is Zachary Woods right now in 13th place. What he needs to do is he needs to finish pretty much up inside of the podium and have the 96 of DJ Daniel finish outside of the top 15.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's honestly, you take a look at that playoffs, it's too much, right? You've got to have, literally, it does happen. It does happen on the very, very rare occasion. We talked about it last week, mathematical, theoretical possibilities. It's a theoretical possibility, yes, but that doesn't mean it's even worth considering, All you can do tonight is go out, run your best race, do what you best possibly can, and see what happens on the other side of it. I mean, there could be, to be perfectly honest, I don't know enough about most of these drivers to be able to sit down and go, this guy has experience in this sort of situation, he's not going to crumble under pressure, he'll be fine. Whereas, these 5 drivers, this is the first time in a playoff, this is where they're sort of sitting. I honestly can't tell you, how many guys last week got into a playoff situation with 2 races to go, recognized that they were just so far down on the points and just went, I gotta force it. I gotta force something. You can't attack every lap of the race, especially in these cars, with these tires, at that kind of a circuit, with that kind of intent and mental attitude. It doesn't work. We saw that last week with the caution, follow caution, follow caution. But you know what? That's fine. So long as the guys learn from that. I can tell you, I had a quick chat with Christopher Lawrence about it, who's one of our race admins last week. He said, yeah, there is some learning from a race admin standpoint. Okay, what do we police? How do we look at things? How do we handle things going forwards? And ultimately, look, the way that I live my life is every single time I'm doing something, all I want to do is improve that something the next time that I come out. So, and that standpoint was definitely very evident from race control, race admins. I want to see that from the drivers now. And given the start that we've had so far, with 26 laps in, everyone's giving space, everyone's using that little bit of patience, everyone's driving to their goals and what they're trying to do. Look, honestly, the amount of learning that came out of last week, that's exactly what I wanted to see.
I'm looking right here. I mean, we're more than 25 laps into this run. This is the revamped version of Kentucky, so obviously the repaved version. And I'm looking at the lap times right now. James Cato, our race leader, his fastest lap was a 30.5. He's now running a 32.1 that last time by. So we're seeing about, nearly 1.6 seconds difference between the laps that he laid down, the fresh tires, and now what he's laying down here. It seems like I'm not necessarily certain if it's just the conditions of the track itself on the long run, but it kind of seems like this track's pretty abrasive on that right front.
Yeah, that's the case. A couple of drivers were saying earlier on in the night as well that during practice they had a little bit of the sun on it still, a little bit of that heat still on the track. The instant the sun went down, they just sort of lost all grip, they lost all balance in the car, they had to go searching for it again, so making a lot of tweaks late, which is generally not good for the confidence in a race car. Right now, what I'm just looking for is take a look at this front pack. So you got Kato, you've got Robinson, you've got Mcquaid, you've got TJ Roberts, right? So these guys are obviously just trying to... If I'm in somebody's, say, Patrick Mcquaid's shoes, obviously the worst possible thing I can do right now is make contact with Matthew Robinson. James Kato, he's having a phenomenal season. He probably doesn't really care too much. He's going to go out and run his fastest race. But everybody else that's sort of in this pack, so both TJ Roberts, both Patrick Mcquaid, these guys are basically... Right now, they're running in that dirty air. So first and foremost, let's feel how the car runs here. Do I think that I can make a tweak? Where do I think the car's going to make a tweak? What do I think is going to happen if I find that clear sort of air in terms of that car stability? So there's a lot of question marks to go with, and Kato is going to have to make some changes because he's led, the bulk of these laps so far as well. So everybody else has just been running in the draft. Matthew Robinson could theoretically become a big issue in this lead pack just because he's been right there and running at the same sort of pace as everyone else, but at the same time he's been saving fuel by running in that draft. But then again, what's his tire scenario? So clear air is going to be crucial. So factors that we need to consider for this race, playoff scenarios, right? We've covered that to death. We'll get through that. Number 2, clean air versus dirty air. How do the tires handle? How do the tires fade? Where is your goal? What kind of tweaks are you going to make? Number 3, fuel scenario. Does running in that draft mean that your fuel scenario gets adjusted to the good, to the bad, or do you just make up a little bit of time on that pit road? Is that where it's coming? And have a look at the, long run versus short run. Last week we saw a lot of quick versus short runs. Short runs versus long runs. We saw a lot of short runs all stacked up together. How did you play around with your tires? This week out, take a little bit of a note from this first sort of set. Okay, now I need to focus on that long run pace. All right, I'm going to adjust the way that I'm driving the car a little bit.
And I have to wonder, too, we were looking at that second group back there with Daniel, Richmond, Phillips, and Anderson. They're racing it up. And they're losing anywhere from 2 to 3 tenths as a result to this lead group. But I also have to wonder just how much draft is playing into these lap times we're seeing as well. These top 4 have stayed single file for the most part. They haven't gone side by side. They haven't really stopped anybody's momentum. And they've been able to keep themselves, with some pretty good speed on these straightaways, all running nose to tail. If we were looking at these guys running by themselves right now we're seeing, in the 32 1s, 32 2s. I wonder if we'd be seeing them in the 32 3s and 4s, just based on the fact they don't have the draft at that point.
100%, yeah, because the draft... But then again, so there's 2 ways to go with this, right? The dirty air is increasing that tire wear on the right front, increasing that tire wear to the right rear, because the thing's just not contacting the road as cleanly. You're using a little bit more throttle, the tires get a little bit hotter, more wear, more abrasiveness. So there is that to consider as well. So maybe their lap times without the draft would actually be a little bit lower. Drivers that I would be looking for doing that is probably Matthew Robinson, who's actually on pit road at this point in time as well. So he's come down for his first stop. So fuel question mark out the window for him. He's going for an undercut strategy. I'm wondering if we're about to start seeing our first round of pit stops as well.
I think we could be.
Or is that an issue?
No, I think he might be coming down for a regularly scheduled stop. Yeah, he is, because, depending on where the fuel window is for these guys, if you do undercut it, as we saw with the fall off there, it's about 1.5 seconds to be gained on fresh tires.
Well, I'm just watching as well. DJ Daniels is actually starting to take chunks out of the 2 cars directly ahead of him on the road, as we actually see another car come to pit road and another couple of cars down on pit road. So Christopher Lawrence is down, and the 88 of Noah Owens. Both of those guys are going to come down to pit road for their first services. So keep your eyes on them to start climbing through the pack. The 43 machine of Phillips currently dropping like a rock throughout the field. That's because he's also on pit road. So pit strategies are going in a couple different directions. The point I was about to make is DJ Daniels is coming. He is currently the fastest car on track, so he has got very good long run speed. The issue for him is that he's lost too much to that lead pack in the early phases of the run. That long run speed is great, but if you give up too much time very early in the run, you're never going to be able to use those tires and that advantage to come back at them.
Oh, you saw the rear tires lock up there for Jeremy Richmond as he tried to woe that thing down to pit road speed. Also, Angel Santiago coming down behind him. And to your point there about DJ Daniel, we saw he didn't really fire off all that well. He lost 2 or 3 spots in the first 10 laps, but yeah, you're right. His lap time's definitely picking up. He was closing in on the top 4 after getting around his teammate Jeremy Richmond for 5th place, and So I don't know if that's necessarily a case of that he was preserving his stuff early and then decided to make the charge late, or if he's just not able to fire off as well as some of these other guys. If that's the case, if it's the latter rather than the former, the last thing he's going to want to see the entirety of this race is caution flags. He wants to utilize this entire 135 laps to be able to work his way up to the front.
I don't necessarily think that. I think during the early phases of the race, I mean, he might have just been using that patience factor. He obviously saw that a lot of the cars around him in that group were fighting quite heavily, and there was no real opportunity to make his way to the fore. He just had to wait for the opportunities to present themselves. So honestly, I believe that's potentially what he was doing with that pack, because the instant he got around all of those guys, foot down, gone, right? So he definitely had the pace. He just had to wait for the opportunity. You can't... Something to remember that we saw a lot of last week is that guys weren't waiting for the opportunity to present themselves. They at Iowa, they were shoving the car down there into a gap that hadn't yet made itself open. And when you do that, you're going to cause wrecks, you're going to cause accidents, you're going to cause most of these things. You combine that with a lot of the restart issues. That's why we saw those back-to-back cautions. And like I said, we talked to lead admins about it. They're going to clamp down on it. They're going to jump on things and try and settle things down. So look, you know, at the end of the day, guys getting a little bit more aggressive. So this week, Daniel, he is in the risk spot, right? He is the guy that is at risk to drop out of these top four. So what is the worst possible thing he can do in the early phase of this race? It's put his car in positions whereby he's going to be compromised, he's going to burn off his tires, and he's going to have no race car left. So I think what he's actually done there in the early phases of the race is exactly what he needed to do to guarantee he's moving on.
That's a great point. You know, I'm going to be interested to see that. I've noticed 3 drivers have not come to pit road yet, and I'm wondering if they're playing the strategy of staying out that extra lap, getting that bonus point. DJ Daniel, who you mentioned, is in that critical 4th position in the points, and the 2 guys that are trying to run him down to get that final 4 spot, Zachary Woods and J.R. Miller. I'm wondering if those 3 playing a little bit of cat and mouse here, trying to see if they can stretch it as far as they possibly can, so that way they can at least lead a lap, get that little bit of security bonus point there. One of them diving onto pit road right now is actually, that's 4th place, yep. Patrick Mcquaid, actually. So, yeah, those 3 still continue to stay out. Now, we saw Matthew Robinson pit as early as lap 34. It could be interesting to see just exactly how far this fuel window can really stretch, as even our race leader, James Cato, has not hit pit road yet, and he's been the guy out there that hasn't had the benefit of draft.
Yeah, I'm actually thinking with our boy Matthew Robinson that what he's trying to do is he just basically went, I can't be around these cars right now, because right before he pit, the group that he was actually in, he was starting to be the worst car from among that bunch, and basically what he needed to do was just to create a little bit of free air, a little bit of space out on track, at a position where he was far more in control of his own destiny, right? Because he's theoretically he's locked in, you know. I mean, regarding like huge, massive penalties, I suppose he's locked in, right? So what's the benefit of staying out here and doing a long run? You know, you've got other guys that are going to do that. You've got other guys that are going to present that data. What haven't you done for a fair while? It's go on to that alternate strategy. All right, I'm going to pit early. I'm going to push it. I'm going to go for it. I'm going to, you know, run as fast as I possibly can on a second set of tires. Early on, I'm going to just, you know, be right there, do what I can, fight with these guys. He's thrown down an alternate strategy, and he's forced a lot of the other drivers to reconsider their positions, and ultimately, I actually think this has really, really helped out his teammate in DJ Daniels, because all of a sudden, his car was just starting to get strong. Now he's allowed to extend that stint out, and other guys have burned up a set of tires behind the wall. So here comes James Cato to pit road.
He's going to hit pit lane on lap 44, 10 laps after Matthew Robinson hit the pit lane. You saw Robinson was right on his back bumper to unlap himself, so I think this is going to cycle the 99 back to the race lead. He started this race from the pole position. Right now, TJ Roberts leading the way, and we had some developments take place here during the green flag pit stop. It's kind of a good news, bad news for Christopher Lawrence. The bad news is he's out of the race. He put it to the garage area about 8 laps ago. Will finish 17th. The good news is I don't think he can mathematically fall outside of the top 4 because he was plus 18 over J.R. Miller, and there were only 17 cars in the field here tonight. So I think that Lawrence, with the fact that we only had 17 cars in this race, there was no mathematical way that he could fall out of the championship for next week. But obviously not sure what happened to him there. I don't know if this was a decision to come to pit lane and maybe just take on the admin duties here tonight, or if he had something a little bit more sinister take place when he came to pit road. But obviously tough break there for a former winner this season, as now Roberts gives up the lead for pit lane.
All right, so TJ Roberts, DJ Daniels both coming to pit lane. You know what that means to me? That says that's our maximum fuel window. So keep that in the back of our mind, guys. 46 laps, maximum fuel window. I reckon you maybe can stretch it to 47 with a tiny little bit of clutching, but it's so difficult to save fuel around here. You really basically got to be running at 3/4 throttle. It's nearly a super speedway-esque fuel saving strategy. You don't want to jump the clutch. You kind of just want to roll out and sit in behind. So everyone's coming to pit lane now. And it's interesting to note the couple guys that we were talking about in terms of playoff contention as well is J.R. Miller, Kyle Gartner. I believe Woods has actually already made his stop, but I'm looking at Miller and I'm looking at Gartner and going, okay, these guys have run the maximum possible distance. 46 laps. Let's talk about race strategy as a whole. 46 laps gets you to... We're just shy of 100, so that's about a third race distance actually right there. It's very, very close. Actually, it's pretty much bang on a third race distance. So that's what these guys are targeting then. There's a potential, I would say, for Matthew Robinson to make it. I mean, it depends. If these guys that's the maximum fuel window is the third of the race distance, then you can lock Matthew Robinson into a 3-stop strategy rather than a 2-stop strategy. He's just not going to make it happen. So he's going to have to go gangbusters the whole race long just to try and get his race back on track. In terms of everything else, I think DJ Daniels has played himself into a perfect position. I think James Cato now is on a 3-stop strategy as well. So I'm looking at the lead guys that come out, the positives out of that. I believe it was the 11 car from memory, and so TJ Roberts and DJ Daniels, who are the two guys that are going to be effectively your race leaders when these pit stop cycles carry all the way through.
Yeah, unless there's like a tremendous amount of fuel saving that goes into play, right now it looks like to me Robinson, Phillips, Anderson, Santiago, Hubka, Jones, and Jeremy Richmond. These are the drivers that cannot make it without coming to pit road at least 2 more times. Everybody else, if they come to pit road another 46, 47 laps into this run, they should conceivably be able to make it to about lap 140, 141, which is over the 135 scheduled laps. So I think that most of your field right now, they're just going to have to come to pit road one more time. That is barring any caution coming out. That's going to change the strategy up a ton. And I think that maybe Jeremy Richmond, we saw he locked up those rear tires. I believe he got a speeding penalty. So he's going to find himself a lap down in the 14th position. But remember I talked about those 3 drivers there of Daniels as well as Jeremy Miller and Zachary Woods trying the strategy of maybe leading a lap. Well, one of them did it. Zachary Woods got the bonus point for a lap led. He paid the price that was staying out as long as he did, though. He now finds himself 5th car, 1 lap down, back in the 13th position.
But he will have 1 lap fresher tires than everyone. It's not a huge margin, but it couldn't be enough to swing the tide in his direction. Now, the fact that he's gone 48 laps says to me that there's a potential that these guys have gone to their maximum tank. So I would say 46, 47 is about the maximum tank, and Zachary Woods has done some fuel saving just to make sure he grabs a bonus point there. Now, his remainder of the race, he can run full throttle because he doesn't need to save any more fuel, right? 3 sets of 48, he's got excess fuel in the tank, so he can just go for it now. There's no fuel saving required from him. He'll push his tires and get the absolute most out of them the entire way around. Let's have a look at our field and the way that the strategies have started to play out. So remember Matthew Robinson, pitted on lap 34, went for that undercut. Well, it has worked. He is 7 seconds clear of James Cato. James Cato, however, is making up a bit over a second a lap on him. So that will close, for my liking, in, within a 10 lap sort of range. If we say that margin closes at about, let's say 0.8, 0.7, and 0.8 of a second a lap that we can guarantee, within 10 laps we're going to see a fight for the lead. Ryan Phillips is pitted lap 36, just after Matthew Robinson. He cycled himself a long way towards the front of the race. He's now about similar sort of pace to Matthew Robinson. Matthew Robinson just slightly faster. After that, you get into a lot of the drivers that started pitting in that interim range. With the exception of TJ Roberts is on a very good strategy. Patrick Mcquaid pit on lap 42. Josh Anderson was lap 38. Angel Santiago was lap 37. Chris Hubka was lap 39. And James Jones was lap 38. All these guys are currently right in front of DJ Daniels, so he's going to have to run them down and get past them. TJ Roberts has got the freshest tires of everyone in this lead pack, and he's the longest distance up the track from all these guys as well. He has the least to do, least cars to pass. That puts him, I think, in probably the best situation of anyone.
Yeah, not sure what happened with DJ Daniel on his pit stop, but most drivers, when they came down, they were anywhere between 14 to 16 seconds for their 4-tire stop. He spent about nearly 30 seconds on pit lane. He didn't get hit with a penalty or anything like that, but it was a very slow stop for the 96. And as you mentioned, now he's got a bit of work to do to cut his way up through the field. Came down pit road while running in the 5th position. Now finds himself nearly the last car on the lead lap in 10th place. Kyle Gartner is actually the last car on the lead lap right now. There he is, just crossing the start-finish line behind the 96. 11 drivers on the lead lap, 16 of them all running. The only driver out of the race right now is the 9 of Christopher Lawrence. And you remember you talked about that 7.5-second gap that Matthew Robinson had over Cato. It's now down to 4 seconds, and Cato is flying.
Yep, James Cato coming. I mean, look, to be perfectly honest, 11-lap fresher tires, that's what it looks like. It looks like nearly a second a lap. I will mention, though, that the pace has actually dropped off quite significantly in the differential between himself and Matthew Robinson. Robinson, his last lap by was a 32.1. James Cato, 31.4. So Matthew Robinson started to get to that stabilization point, and James Cato's still on his way back up towards him. So he is catching him at a slower rate of knots at the moment. Most importantly, though, Matthew Robinson's had the assistance of a draft for a couple of laps in that cycle. So he will catch him eventually. Whether or not it's before Matthew Robinson decides to go down pit road again or not, completely and utterly different question.
Had a great battle here for 6th place, and this is interesting in the case of Angel Santiago because he came down pit road around the same times that Matthew Robinson and Ryan Phillips did. He last pitted back on lap 38. And he's holding off Josh Anderson for the time being, has been able to hold himself up there in the 6th position. And this was a guy that was running outside of the top 10 when the green flag pit stops began. So a nice pickup for him, up 11 spots since the drop of the green flag. So that slow, methodical patience you were talking about, that's what Santiago's been able to do here.
I mean, I wonder whether or not he's actually looking after his tires quite well, because, like, he's just made a couple moves. Right now, he's running in that clear air. You can see that Jeremy Richand, who's the car just in behind him, makes a lot of ground up on the corner entry, and then it sort of comes back to Angel Santiago on exit. He's got that little bit more of a momentum, but Santiago's running that higher line. He's just going to relinquish it, look to run on the draft, look to look after his tires a little bit. Right now, everyone's just sort of in this holding pattern, if you don't mind the terminology. So what I'm sort of feeling from these guys is that basically right now, look after the car, look after the tires. Guys that are particularly looking to do that currently is Matthew Robinson, James Cato. In my mind, Cato should be more aggressive on his tire saving right now because he will catch Matthew Robinson. What he wants to do is create that tire overlap for as long a period as he possibly can and force Matthew Robinson into something different. But there's battles up and down the pack. Guys are right near each other in terms of the racetrack. I mean, this is exactly what you want from a NASCAR race. Like, if you were to tell me at the start of the race that we'd have these sorts of little battle packs right the way throughout the field with 17 on the circuit, I would have told you laughing.
So if Matthew Robinson is indeed on that 3-stop strategy, we're going to probably be seeing him on pit road within the next 10 laps once again. Went 34 laps on the first stint, and it gained him all of this track position, which is now slowly dwindling with James Cato closing to his back bumper. Let's take the opportunity here to find those 3 spotlight drivers we talked about coming into tonight. The cutoff line driver DJ Daniel has now picked up a couple of spots since we last looked, from 10th up to 8th in the last 10 laps. J.R. Miller, right now the last car on the lead lap. He currently runs in the 12th position. And Zachary Woods, who we saw pull off that strategy, he's got the freshest tires in the field, but he is the first car 1 lap down right now in 13th place. Actually, kind of had to do a little bit of a double take here this evening at Zachary Woods' machine. Used to seeing the Racing with Jesus number yellow. That's a, yes, yellow is a number. The color yellow number 60 machine out there. Well, he picked up new sponsorship this week. Been a big week for him. He's got Lancaster Bible College, Capital Seminary, and Graduate School on his machine. Not only that, but there's actually a feature story on him and his sim racing career in the Echo, the Lancaster Bible College newsletter. So big week for him. Nice to see him with that new sponsorship, and right now trying to see if he can will that machine into the Final Four. He's still got a shot because we haven't even reached halfway here tonight at Kentucky.
You can say he's still got a shot, but like, let's do a little bit of a breakdown on what's going on right now out on track. Okay, so the guys to point their way in, they are going to need phenomenal nights in terms of the point standings, right? So for JR Miller, he needs to score 8 points more than DJ Daniels, or 7 points and lead a lap, right? Right now, DJ Daniels actually hasn't led a lap, so bonus point currently a strike through his name for the bonus point, right? Right now, I think he's got a shot at leading it at the back end of this fuel stint, but he's a long way back off TJ Roberts, so TJ Roberts has kind of got that one locked up. Don't think that Miller will get the bonus point either, so he's going to need 8 more points. Do you want to know the difference between these two guys on track? It's nearly a whole lap. It's actually quite dramatic. So the 60 machine is currently heading off of 1 and 2, down the back stretch, and his target, the 96, is... Actually, I'm struggling to see him on my track map. He's actually just going through 1 and 2 now, so it's basically a straightaway difference in terms of where those cars are positioned on the track. It's too much. If Zachary Woods was going to be able to make his way in, it's too much. In terms of JR Miller, I think JR Miller's only a little bit better, currently coming off of... where are we? Matthew Robinson's actually on pit lane, so JR Miller's just gone past the start-finish line. The 96 machine is currently through 1 and 2. So he's there. He's only a corner sort of behind DJ Daniel. But he would need to outscore him, remember, by 8 points. And he's that far. He's 5 seconds behind him at this phase of the race. He has to get by him, and he has to grab 8 further points. It's not happening. I'm sorry, man. It is not happening. We got 4 drivers that are basically locked in.
Robinson as well as Ryan Phillips on pit road that last lap. And the race lead back over to James Cato. And, you know, obviously, hindsight's 20/20, but you go back to last week at Iowa in the case of J.R. Miller, and you wonder what if. Remember when he threw that big block on James Cato for the race lead late in that event? Ended up getting wrecked into the outside wall, had to come down pit road, had to take on a faster pair, fell back in the field, and finished outside the top 10, 11th place. I mean, 7 points, measly 7 points coming into tonight's race could have been to the good. Could have been maybe +2 or 3 over DJ Daniel, who also found struggles late in Iowa's race last week. I mean, if you think what if for J.R. Miller, if he had maybe not been quite as aggressive to try and hold that race lead, maybe brought it home inside of the podium, he wouldn't have been the guy on the outside looking in. He may have very well been the guy that everyone was going to be gunning for here tonight.
Yeah, and I think more to the important note of that is, yeah, sure, threw that big block and got wrecked. Guess where that put him? It put him right in the back of the pack on the next restart. I think he got massive damage on that very next restart, and that basically put the line through his sort of championship hopes at Iowa. So you take that one incident from that one race out, and he's on the inside. You know, that's because it's all about track position at Iowa. It was all about looking after the car. It was all about getting there. And when the tempers started to rise, he put his car in a really, really good situation. He gave himself a brilliant opportunity, and he wanted to race it a lot harder than he needed potentially to do. He had great pace. He's had great pace. I wasn't expecting him to be this far back tonight, if I'm being honest, after the performance at Iowa last week. He drove a phenomenal race, and at the end of it you can say, yeah, I mean, he got unlucky, but ultimately, when you throw a block that big, that's a decision that you as a driver have made, and you've got to review that after the race and go, did I need to do that? Yeah, no. So, look, I mean, say unlucky, but ultimately he's the guy that's crippled his own championship hopes. So, look, I mean, he'll learn from that. He'll come back stronger next season. So,
Right now, he's under fire from the race leader. Miller, the last car on the lead lap, but only 2 car lengths back is James Cato. This long green flag run has allowed the fast machines like Cato and Robinson to catch up to drivers inside of the top 10. Granted, we had a number of drivers just hit pit road that look like they're on that 3-stop strategy as well. There you saw the 90 of Angel Santiago coming back on the track. Josh Anderson and James Jones, they've been to pit road as well, and there is Miller about to lose a lap. The fresh tires of Santiago going to split it 3 wide down this front straightaway, headed for 1.
Yeah, Santiago's actually blinking a fair bit, so Cato's just, Cato, again, is just going to take that, use his head a little bit and just make sure that he's keeping himself in the game, so good job from him and good job from all the drivers. We're talking about, like I said, patience at the top of the broadcast, patience from our pastor. That's a really, really good display out there, guys. Everyone recognized that there was probably a little bit too many cars right together there on the racetrack. There's different cars on different tires, on different strategies. Every single one of them made sure that they all lived to fight another day.
More than halfway home in this race. We're yet to see a single caution flag here tonight. It'd be nice to see that stay for the entire 135 laps. See who's got the best strategy. You got James Cato, who appears to be on the 2-stop strategy. Matthew Robinson. Those two have been at each other this entire race. He's on the 3-stop strategy. We're not going to be seeing Cato on pit road for another 17 laps, 15 to 17 laps. Somewhere around lap 1, or 92 to 95 is when we're expecting to see him make what would be his final pit stop of the night, potentially. And give a call out here to TJ Roberts. I've been watching him this entire night. He has been up there inside the top 5 pretty much the entirety of this race. He's right now running in the 2nd position. He's on the same strategy for the most part as our race leader. And you look at his season, he's only made 7 starts this year, but it's been a lot of up and down. He's had 4 finishes inside of the top 10, best finish of 4th. His other finishes have been outside of the top 15. And right now, running in the 2nd position, his pace has been good, his long run speed has been good, and he might be closing this thing out potentially with his best finish of the season.
Tell you what, coming to pit road at this point in time, so he's decided to make the decision to move to the 3-stop strategy because he can't get home from here. So he's opted. He said, you know what? I've been watching Matthew Robinson. He's done something slightly different here. He's been the guy to beat. Let's go with him. Let's beat him at that strategy. I don't know if he is. Right now, I think he'd probably pop out right around the same sort of section of the track as Matthew Robinson. Maybe Matthew Robinson's tires have allowed him to grab that little bit of space, but he is going to be gunning it for Matthew Robinson. Speaking of Robinson on the road, right around James Cato at this point in time. So I wonder if those boys will be nice and clean with each other, or they might come to blows just purely because both of those guys want to show their wares.
I believe that TJ Roberts is the only driver so far that has strayed from one starting strategy and called an audible going to another. Do you agree with that, or do you think that if you came into this race completely planning you were going to do a 2-stop strategy that you should just stick to your guns and do that?
He'd be definitely keeping his eyes on Matthew Robinson for sure. Look, I mean, he probably recognized that he was never going to catch James Cato on the strategy that he was on. He saw the window of opportunity come to vary that strategy, and he came down pit road and said, hey, you know what? There's an opportunity here. You know, right now, I'm going to finish 2nd. I'm most likely going to finish 2nd on the current strategy that I'm on. Is there an opportunity for me to better myself? Is there an opportunity for me to get out there to really show what I'm about and race hard and potentially come away? He's thrown caution to the wind, and he's gone for an alternative strategy. It takes a lot of guts to do that. It is not easy to make that decision. A lot of the times you just sort of lock yourself in, but he's just going, you know what? There's something more here. I've got to try.
5 drivers currently on the lead lap. Still several drivers that have to make their 2nd stop of the evening. Matthew Robinson is last of those drivers. He just unlapped himself about 2 or 3 laps ago. There you see race leader James Cato behind him now crossing the start-finish line. With TJ Roberts hitting pit lane, that now moves Patrick Mcquaid up to 2nd place, with DJ Daniel now in the 3rd position. Mcquaid's only made 3 starts this season. He had a 4th place run, his best finish at Talladega, another finish inside the top 10 at Iowa. He's only got 1.5 mile start under his belt here this season, and it was his worst finish of the 3, 18th place at Chicagoland. Doing a lot better here tonight, qualified up in the 6th position, and hasn't dropped outside of the top 10, pretty much the top 5 the entirety of this evening.
I mean, you can't take it when you talk about it being his first start back at Chicagoland. You kind of can't take too much out of that. When you're new to a league like that, you really gotta you've got to settle in, you've got to find something. Obviously, there was, more than likely, whatever happened at Chicagoland, I don't necessarily think that would have been him showing his wares. I just think that's the nerves of a new league, trying to come to grips with everything, trying to settle yourself in. So I think you just sort of put a pencil through that result, and you just go, it is what it is. We learned a lot from that night out. I mean, yeah, you talk about it. Patrick Mcquaid, I don't think necessarily has had the out-and-out raw speed of everyone else around him, but he's also not been slow. Are we seeing him come to pit load? We are, actually, so that's perfect timing to talk about him. I would say here is a driver with a big opportunity. Yeah, he misses the playoffs this season, but he's put himself in some really, really strong positions. This is a driver who's focused on next season. He has the opportunity, right, to sit down tonight and go, I'm not in playoff contention, season's about over, I could just not go and run. I could go and run something else. I could go and have a little bit of fun. I could spend some time with my family. What he's done is he's showed up and he's found an opportunity to get himself some experience around some of these drivers again. If he's continuing to progress up the grid as well, he's racing around different drivers. So he's starting to get a lot of understanding of the way that these guys race, where their strengths and weaknesses are. This is a guy, like I said, setting himself up for next season.
Great point, because you're right. A lot of times when you're not in playoff contention, you'll see the field sizes of a league start to wane thin the closer and closer we get to championship week. But it is those drivers that are out there continuing to get the experience, racing around these guys. The following season, they come back, and next thing you know, they're up there racing with those guys and competing with those guys for wins. So keep an eye on that 73, as he's been pretty fast here the last couple of weeks and showing that speed again here tonight at Kentucky Speedway. James Cato continuing to show the way. He's continuing to close in, though, on that fuel window. It'll be interesting to see here, too, because, as I mentioned back on that first run, everyone was pretty close together. You had your little niches, your little groups. You had a group of 4 up in the race lead. You had about a group of 5 back from 5th place back to around 9th. And then you had a third group that had about 6 or 7 cars. And obviously, draft was coming into play with drivers cutting the wind for others, and so they could make it a little bit further on fuel. I'm going to be interested to see if indeed 47 laps is the furthest that James Cato can make it this time, or with the fact that he's not really been around a whole lot of traffic, not been able to get a whole lot of draft, if that's actually going to cut that window down by a pretty sizable amount of laps.
Potentially. I mean, the window he pitted on lap 45 the first time around, so 45, 90, 135. I think he might actually have a lap number in his head. Honestly, if I'm in James Cato's position, just for a little bit of safety and security, I'm probably trying to stretch it all the way out. 47 laps from the first window would put him to 92. So that would be my target lap for him. It just gives you a fuel buffer. Just if anything happens, you've just got that extra little bit of fuel in the tank, that extra little bit of safety and security. You lose a couple laps worth of fresher tires in terms of the undercut, but you're then on potentially the freshest tires for the remainder of the race. It's just, to me, it just makes sense. When you've got so much control over the field to continue laying down that control and really exerting your pressure on everyone else. I expect the same, to be perfectly honest, from DJ Daniels. I don't expect that a lot of these guys that are up in the top sort of positions, there's really no pressure on them from a lot of the guys that are actually around them. So in that sort of an instance, you've got 2 options. Like, you can either improve your lot. Remember playoff standings, so DJ Daniels, he's just going to take, honestly, if he finishes where he is, no one can beat him. No one knocks him out of the playoffs or the standings, and in fact, he'll move ahead of Saucier, who's not on the grid. So keep that in the back of your mind. DJ Daniels will just take the consistent finish. He won't push himself too far. Gartner might go aggressive in terms of the tire strategy. He's going to make something happen. He's really going to throw caution to the wind. There's a good opportunity for him here, actually, potentially. How far back is he? 13 points. So he's 20 points back of Saucier. He would need to score 21 points to point his way in. He's got an opportunity in terms of Kyle Gartner, but he's got to go for it, So we're talking last week about Iowa, the drivers, the mentality, the strategy after coming off potentially disastrous finishes at Talladega. Kyle Gardner's, for my mind, the one guy that is in that spot that he has got to force it. I just heard James Cato on the radio. He's coming out of pits. He's a little shy of the fuel window. I wonder if he's actually not in trouble.
Cato pitting on lap 90. You talked about the possibility of maybe splitting the final 90 laps into a 45-45. This would be right on the mark of doing so. Also, J.R. Miller in the 78 coming down pit lane, so he might be close. He might be like right on the cusp, right on the window.
Oh, yeah.
And I had to look there. When he came to pit road, there was about 22 seconds between himself and Matthew Robinson. So let's speculate that maybe if we continue this run under the green flag, I mean, he could have anywhere from 15 to 20 seconds to work with in the closing stage of this race if Robinson's not able to find a little bit more speed here when he eventually makes what will be his third and more than likely final pit stop of the day. Kato, I don't think, has any plans of coming back to pit road, and DJ Daniel, you talked about him. He looked like he pretty much had a game plan, just keep himself ahead of his competition in the form of the 78 of Miller and the 60 of Woods. He also, right there, stayed out and led a lap. So that just took away the bonus point that Woods got earlier on in this race. And he's just been running his own race as DJ Daniel. He's not been around a whole lot of traffic, just been minding his P's and Q's. And right now, as you said, leapfrogs Corey Saucier as well. So Saucier, the driver he would have to worry about would be J.R. Miller. But as we mentioned, in order to catch Saucier, J.R. Miller's got to finish up inside of the podium, and he has not led a lap here tonight yet as well.
I think the biggest threat to Saucier is Woods. Not Woods. Sorry, Gartner. Gartner's, like I said, 21 points is the margin that he needs to do it. I can't recall that Gartner led a lap either. So I'm not 100% sure here. Zachary Woods, I'm just looking at. I think there's a potential that he actually did lead a lap, so he would only need. What's that? He would be 18 points back, so he would only need 18 points to get ahead with the bonus points. So Woods is threatening, but Woods would need, again, a podium finish to really, push himself clear. In my mind, if I'm going to be honest here, I think we've got our top four locked in. I don't think. When you're in this sort of a situation, the guys that need to do it all are those guys that are below the cut line. Miller maybe didn't need to have a phenomenal race, but he still needed to have a consistent race. He needed to score 15 points, which would be top 5. Hasn't done that. Woods, he would need a podium. Absolutely minimum need a podium. And Gartner is in the same boat, only two positions behind him. Both of those guys, Woods, not a great night. I'm sorry, mate. You needed to do more, and you haven't quite done enough. Gartner is there. Gartner is in the equation, but he's so far back that he needs everything to go his way. Everything hasn't gone his way. He hasn't had the outright pace that he needed. He's done as well, man. We've got our top 4.
Yeah, Woods actually just made his potentially final pit stop of the night. We saw the 43 of Ryan Phillips come down pit road. It looks like it was an unscheduled stop. I thought maybe he was kind of doing the reverse of what TJ Roberts did, flip-flopping from what was going to be a 3-stop strategy and try and go for the 2-stop strategy instead. He's now leaving pit road, but he spent almost 50 seconds on pit lane, so obviously big issues there for Ryan Phillips, now 3 laps down. This was a guy that was on the same strategy as race leader Matthew Robinson, and it was working for him.
I don't know what's happened there, man. Like, that's disappointing for Ryan Phillips. I mean, another driver that was again trying something, really trying to. I really like the term "show their wares" because that's what it's all about, right? You come out here, you show what you're capable of, you show your goods and services on the racing circuit, and I mean, he's done so. He ran quickly. He ran an alternative strat. He showed that he's not a driver that's not afraid to take a risky strategy if he can execute it perfectly. It's execution. Yeah, I mean, the words just popped into my head, and I'm sitting here going, why didn't I think of that earlier tonight? Because that is 100% what it's all about. I actually just watched DJ Daniels completely and utterly drive by TJ Roberts. So those tires are on their last. TJ Roberts has definitely got one more stop to go, and I mean, the guy's not in playoff contention, so he's like I said, throwing caution to the wind. He's alternating the strategy. He's trying something different. I think he's dead in the water as well. He hasn't had the length of time on alternate sets of tires to really benefit from them, and he spent too long on very, very old used rubber to make that strategy work as well.
DJ Daniel right now, the first car 1 lap down in 7th place. Guys, he's trying to stay ahead of. J.R. Miller is right now 1 lap down in 11th. Zachary Woods, who's just ahead of him, is -2, currently mired in the 13th position. So right now, barring anything crazy happening in these final 40 laps,
no, it can't happen.
The 4 drivers that came into this race in the Final 4 are going to be your Final 4 to compete for the championship next week at Homestead, which, again, remember, Matthew Robinson, he's been dominant. He won at Talladega. He won last week at Iowa. Right now, it looks like it's going to come down between him and James Cato for the win here tonight. He might go for the sweep here leading into the playoff races into Homestead, but he, along with his other three playoff contenders there in that Final Four, they're all going to be at an even amount of points. It's going to come down to who has the best finish, and that might have been the first mistake we saw, the 99 right there. Almost brushed the wall off of turn 2, but it's all about momentum right now here for Matthew Robinson, trying to carry that into Homestead, knowing that it's pretty much just going to come down to best finish wins that championship trophy.
Oh, he just come to pit lane as well. Did I just see that happen? I think no, sorry. Yeah, I did. Matthew Robinson on pit lane. So he's come through for his final service. 35 to go. His tires aren't going to be a massive offset like they have previously so far tonight. Lap 90 from James Cato. So, 10 laps is the advantage in terms of tires. It's going to be in the realm of half a second to a full second, for the remainder of the race. And he is going to be quite some distance back. I really want to see where he pops out, because this could be interesting for the race win.
Yeah, the race win is going to be 35 laps here. Pretty much going to be between the three who I think has made his final pit stop and that 99 of Matthew Robinson, who's going to have those fresh tires, 11 lap fresher tires than James Cato. And, you talked about the fact that that Final Four can't change. I have to agree with you, especially when I look at the fact of bonus points that drivers could get here tonight. Pretty much for J.R. Miller and Zachary Woods coming tonight, there was only 2 points that they could have possibly gotten here this evening. A driver can get a maximum amount of 4 bonus points. A bonus point for winning the pole, well, that went to Matthew Robinson. A bonus point for leading the most laps, that obviously is going to go to either Cato or Robinson here tonight. And then a bonus point for leading, or 2 bonus points, for leading the most laps. So those 2 bonus points are gone. And then a bonus point for leading 1 or more laps. And obviously the only driver that took advantage of that was Zachary Woods. And right now running the last car 1 lap down. Pretty much, it looks like Saucier, as well as Robinson, DJ Daniel, and Christopher Lawrence. They're going to be the drivers to battle it out for the championship next week at Homestead.
Yeah, number 11 car coming to pit lane to service his vehicle for the final time. Oh, there's a big wreck on pit lane. The 7 car. What's happened to him?
Looks like he
Josh
might have,
Anderson.
Did he lock it up and spin coming to pit road? It was right in front of second place TJ Roberts. He keeps the thing going.
Yeah,
no
he's locked it
caution
up.
going to come out.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. Nail on the head. Oh, that's a big impact, actually, onto the inside of the pit wall. So he'll have, I'm sure, a speeding penalty and a fast repair will need to be burned. So,
And you have to wonder just how much did that hold up. Then second place TJ Roberts when he was coming on to pit road. Even something as minuscule as that can lose you 2 or 3 positions out there on the racetrack if you're not able to maintain the 45 miles per hour there on pit road as far as pit road speed. You talk about fast repairs. There's actually a number of drivers that have already used a fast repair here. A number of them that had already made their final pit stop of the day, surprisingly enough. Didn't see a whole lot of contact exchange between car versus car or car versus wall, but Patrick Mcquaid running right now in the 2nd position. He's used a fast repair. Kyle Gartner and Matthew Robinson in 4th and 5th. They've already used a fast repair, so I guess even if you make a little bit of a brush with the wall or something like that, you want to make sure that that car is at 100% for the final run to the checkers.
yeah, it's in terms of tires. You want to make sure that the aero package around you isn't compromised in any way, so that you have the best tires underneath you. Actually, keep your eyes on Patrick Mcquaid at this point in time. He's actually in this huge pack of multiple cars that are lapped down trying to grab their lap back. And I was actually just watching, I believe TJ Roberts re-entered the circuit. No, it was Josh Anderson re-entered the circuit just in front of them. So TJ Roberts come out just ahead. TJ Roberts is going to be just a lap down. There's a whole group of cars just ahead of him that have taken their final service. Matthew Robinson is 10 seconds up the road from TJ Roberts, pit 3 laps earlier than TJ Roberts. So Matthew Robinson has got that strategy right, and TJ Roberts, close. Not quite enough, buddy. Haven't got it bang on the nail on the head, so he's got a lot of work to do. He may get himself back a podium by overtaking DJ Daniels, but I think that's the best opportunity he's got tonight. Matthew Robinson, I still think he's got a potential for a win here. It's tough because he's just gotten his lap back on James Cato right now. There's under 30 laps to go. He would need to make more than a second a lap and make the overtake in like the last 2 laps to win the race.
And he's only 11 lap fresher tires than James Cato. If it were 20, 25 laps between the two of them, no contest. I think that Matthew Robinson has a really good shot, but I'm not necessarily certain if just 11 laps difference between the tires of the 3 and the tires of the 99, if that's going to be enough time for Robinson to reel him in.
I mean, he's going to get Daniels. I don't think that's even a question. In fact, Daniels is actually only 4 seconds up the road, so James Cato has nearly lapped the entire field. That is a performance of the night, to be perfectly honest with you. That's a phenomenal performance from James Cato. Good on short runs, good on medium runs, good on long runs. I think he just had a really, really good all-around package tonight. He ticked absolutely every box. In terms of watching Matthew Robinson, he is taking about the amount of time that he needs to out of everyone. It's right there on the buffer, but he's got to maintain that pace advantage for the entirety of this stint to be able to run down James Cato. And that is a big, big ask. In fact, with 25-ish laps from home now, so it is it's going to be in that 1.3 second range, I think, to really be able to make it back.
Started calling James Cato Mr. Mile and a Half. He had 6 starts prior to tonight in the season. 2 of those races were at mile-and-a-half tracks at Chicagoland and Texas. He won them both. And then, also add to that, he took the checkered flag in the All-Star race, which took place at the mile-and-a-half Charlotte Motor Speedway. And, boy, I'll tell you what, whatever mile-and-a-half program he's got, it works for him. And so, it may very well, as I said, come down next week to who of the final 4 competitors finishes the best, because they may not win that mile-and-a-half race. We might be looking at the guy that could be the favorite going into the season finale to take the checkered flag for the race win.
Yeah, so ultimately, all right, let's talk scenarios now for next week. So Matthew Robinson's done absolutely everything he needs to. He's going to clean it up. He's going to be the top finishing of these guys. You know what? I think this actually, if Saucier has locked himself into these top 4, I think him taking a week off here is actually one of the best things he can do. He's hiding his pace. He's really trying to throw a blanket over some of these guys. Alternatively, he could have just not been available for tonight's race, and sometimes you got that. He's going to be focused for next week. He's going to know what he's after, and I'm sure he's going to be out there and putting all the practice laps he needs to. Just keeping an eye on race results at this point in time. DJ Daniels loses second place to Matthew Robinson, so Robinson's back to P2. It's a good job by him. So, in order for James Cato to really be a factor, I think we're going to see quite a few cautions next week. I'm going to be honest, because you're going to have guys that the nerves are going to really start to rise. Let's talk about the season that has been for these guys. Matthew Robinson has clearly shown he is Mr. Consistent. He's Mr. Quick. He is right there every single week, and he's been the only one, for my liking, that has put his car in a position every week to win the race, which is phenomenal. It's been a phenomenal performance. He's kept his car out of harm's way last week at Iowa. Great job. What does he need to do next week to win the championship? Does he change anything? Playoffs do a funny thing to the old mind. It one race to decide it all. Could Matthew Robinson go from being one of the best and most consistent finishers to he just cannot seal the deal and has a terrible race, terrible outing next week? It's possible, man. Don't take that out of the equation. Let's look at Christopher Lawrence. Again, another driver who pulled it down a pit lane early tonight, wanted to put the cover on things and just sort of go, all right, I've got enough experience. I'm feeling good for next week. Christopher Lawrence is, in the couple races I've seen from him, no real standout performances, but he's had flashes of brilliance throughout the race. He's had periods in the races where he's been out there, he's been in the lead group, he's been winning things. So don't necessarily throw him out the window to, if you underestimate Christopher Lawrence, you are making a big, big mistake. Saucier, for my liking, was one of those aggressive drivers last week at Iowa, so he's there, he's in the equation, he's got an opportunity. Could Saucier be the guy that comes through and again shows that aggression is the way to the championship? For Saucier, I think again another good opportunity. And then have a look at DJ Daniels. He's of these 4 drivers, I don't think he's ever shown that he's the quickest driver. But what I think you can say is that he has performed and executed these strategies to perfection. You're right, he's never been the fastest driver of this top 4. But guess who's always there and always has his name right there in the equation? It's DJ Daniels. What is going to win a championship next week? It's going to be staying clean of the mess, making sure that you've got a competitive car, And DJ Daniels has done that over the last couple of weeks.
He has, and if you look as well at DJ Daniel, I mentioned the fact that James Cato, he's been winning a slew of mile-and-a-half tracks in the last few weeks, in the last couple of months. Well, before he burst onto the scene, it was DJ Daniel that was winning at the mile-and-a-half tracks. He had a win at Las Vegas, he had a win at Darlington, and he had a win at the points-paying race at the Charlotte Oval. So, DJ Daniel, obviously very good at the mile-and-a-half tracks as well, so kind of a little bit of a guy you cannot sleep on when you get to Homestead next week. So I want to touch real quickly here as well on what you were talking about with Saucier and with Christopher Lawrence. In the case of Corey Saucier, he's got a teammate that he can lean on that had a pretty good run going here tonight before having that unscheduled pit stop in Ryan Phillips. Phillips spent a good portion of this race, yes, with an off-sequence strategy, but up inside of the top 5, that's information that Corey Saucier is going to be able to glean off of his teammate in the 43 to apply for next week at Homestead, Miami. And then also Christopher Lawrence, yes, he parked his car early here tonight, finishing dead last in the 17th position, but two guys that right now, well, one of them actually just came to pit road, but Chris Hupka was running up in the 6th position, and right now Kyle Gartner running in 4th place. These are some teammates that he can glean some information off of as well as far as their mile-and-a-half program when they get to championship week next week.
Yeah, and something else as well. So you talk about Chris Lawrence. You got to remember, he's a series admin here. Next week, what I want to see the rest of the admin team do is, all right, we're taking all of this out of your hands, and you are not an admin for next week's race. You are just a driver, which I think is the best possible thing. What that means is that he gets to focus entirely on his race. He doesn't have any of the anxiety that comes from attempting to manage a league, race in a league, and all that all at the same time. And he gets to focus entirely on what he needs to do to win the championship. Now, as his teammates then will pick up a lot of the slack, that's a really good opportunity for them to show their wares and make sure, hey, this is what you need to do here. This is where you need to strategize. This is what the pit lane numbers are going to be. This is when we're coming down. We're going to try and suck you up here to the leaders. We're going to work with you here. We're going to be pushing you, which is a really, really good opportunity. What you got to remember as well, Matthew Robinson, DJ Daniels, these guys are teammates. Whenever you come into the final week of a playoff, whenever you're coming to that championship race, what is the team scenario? This is a decision that every single team that gets into this sort of a position has to make. Do we continue to work together? Do we shake hands at the end of the week worth of testing and go, all right, we've done all the testing, we've done all the practice, the preparation we can possibly do. Now we go our separate ways? Or do you shake hands after tonight, go, it's been a phenomenal season working with you as a teammate, I'm off on my own, I'm now going to go and work to give myself the best chance I possibly can. Is that a scenario? Who knows? I'm not in Matthew Robinson's head. I don't know who's doing his setups. I don't know who's feeding him the information. He could be doing it all himself and feeding all this sort of stuff to DJ Daniels. So DJ Daniels will want to continue working with Matthew Robinson. Alternatively, Daniels could be the one that's doing the setups. Daniels could be the one that's getting all the information. All of a sudden, Matthew Robinson comes out next week and has a completely and utterly uncharacteristic race and falls from the pedestal. Just because, working with DJ Daniels. So it'll be interesting. I really want to pick those guys' minds in the post-race show because it'll give us a really good understanding of the landscape for next week's race. Saucier, we don't have enough information on him. And I think him having the big question mark over him and the understanding, I think that's probably the best possible thing he can do. Like I said, Lawrence and Saucier both threw blankets over their cars at one point tonight and said, well, Saucier never showed up, but Lawrence, come back down a pit road, threw the blanket over it and said, I know what I'm doing next week. I'm good. I don't need to do anything. Could that be the scenario that they needed? Maybe Chris Lawrence has jumped off. Maybe he's gone and run in a private session and he's already starting to turn those laps at Homestead, Miami. And don't ever underestimate the things that can happen in a championship race, the question marks that all the drivers start to place over each other, you second guess everything that you start to do at the end of a championship, and guys like Matthew Robinson could all of a sudden just underestimate their own abilities a little bit. Oh, can't I put the car down there? Not really. Oh no, it's in the fence. Race over. That can happen just because your thinking changes a little bit. So he needs to come out next week, get himself settled in the car, then start going for it, because I think he's got the opportunity. Daniels, however, I think Daniels will probably be the most settled of the lot. yeah, he comes into this in the 4th place position. He's going to grab Saucier, but only because Saucier didn't show up. Like, the race next week for a championship, I think this is tantalizingly good because you've just got so many different scenarios that are about to rear their heads.
10 laps to go, now 9 laps to go for the race leader. And now he's going to tick off another one and put it at 8 to go. It's over 20 seconds back to Matthew Robinson. So barring a caution, James Cato's en route for his 3rd win on the season. Obviously, as we've seen here tonight in terms of strategy, this racing is just as much mental as it is physical. And to your point with, Christopher Lawrence pulling off the track early, Corey Saucier not in the field here tonight. Maybe a little bit of mind games being played 1 week out from the championship battle at Homestead next week. And want to quickly take the opportunity here to thank the sponsors of BackFire Sim Racing. You see a number of them down the bottom of your screen. Also JKR Motorsports, like them on Facebook and Instagram. Auto Ventures LLC, based in Hudsonville, Michigan. Premier used truck, car, and SUV dealer with the cleanest selection and the lowest prices. Visit them at avcarsales.com. Junior's Mobile Detailing, based in Marion, North Carolina. Simply the best. Find them on Facebook and schedule your detail today. And SimShots. Go to SimShots on Facebook, where you can find awesome photos for cheap prices. So thank you to all of the sponsors for tonight's race, which up to this point has been clean and green. 6 more circuits around Kentucky. James Cato looking for his 3rd win on the season, which means that if he completes this, that not including Homestead next week, all 1.5 mile races this season will either have been won by DJ Daniels or James Cato.
And look, you're going into 1.5 miles next week. What do you want to know from DJ Daniels' standpoint? I'm good. You know what? I think he might have been holding back tonight. I think he might have been holding back tonight. He's literally just out there turning laps because towards the back end of this race, all of a sudden Matthew Robinson's dropped off the pace. He's actually starting to... DJ Daniels is right there on his sort of pace. I think he actually took like a couple hundredths out of him on the last lap from DJ Daniels' standpoint. So Daniels, all of a sudden, starts to take it back to Matthew Robinson. Mind games, mind games, mind games. You know what I love? I love games. You know what the best kind of games are? Mind games.
I know in the case of DJ Daniel as well, I mean, he did what he had to do here tonight. You talked about it with Matthew Robinson, change up his strategy next week, you could run into a mistake. If DJ Daniel came into this race thinking, all right, I got to win. I got to make a statement here tonight as well that, if we're going into Homestead next week, I'm the guy that you have to go through. Instead, he focused on the points. He focused on the guys he had to stay ahead of, the 78 and the 60, make sure that he leapfrogs Corey Saucier, puts him down to the cutoff line driver, and yeah, I think you're right. I think he kind of held a little bit back here tonight, did not show just how strong a car he had for the one purpose of self-preservation, making absolutely sure that that car was going to be in the championship hunt in 1 week's time.
Yep, and again, just box ticking, box checking, systems. It's nearly like this week is kind of just like a systems check week for DJ Daniels. All right, how do I feel after this one? What was the car telling me? How do I feel about the car? Did I feel I could react on pit road? Do I feel I can make the changes that I need to make? And ultimately, I think he has. I think he's definitely come stronger as the night has progressed. We saw very early on he run in the mid-pack, and like I said, he really leveraged that patience of his to get by that queue of cars. To me, that says he's got opportunities to win the championship next week by not being an aggressive driver, and I think he'll stick to his guns on that note. Additionally, actually, DJ Daniels has just backed his pace down quite massively on the last lap, so he must have had a moment in 3 and 4. So whether or not he's fuel compromised in these last couple laps, TJ Roberts is actually just about to get him, so we may not even talk to DJ Daniels on the podium here.
Less than half a second between those two as James Cato took the white flag. Less than 1.5 miles as he'll hit the back straightaway here. En route to his 3rd points-paying win of the season, but 4th of the season if you also throw in the All-Star race a few weeks ago. It's going to be win number 3 for car number 3. Little slow there off of turn 4. Is he out of fuel maybe coasting to the start-finish line? I think he is. The First Page Media 200 is going to go to a coasting James Cato here tonight at Kentucky.
It could be fuel savings. We get to do burnouts. I was just watching DJ Daniels and TJ Roberts just barely got together. coming off of 1 and 2 just then before they head down to the finish now. So, the ailing DJ Daniels with those older set of tires. So TJ Roberts has really shown his wares tonight. He's taken the opportunity to finish off the season nice and strongly. He's gotten himself home. So great job by him.
How about TJ Roberts there? His best finish of the season. He's going to finish on the podium for the first time this year, as he just barely gets DJ Daniel at the line, and James Cato trying to make it back to the start-finish line. Looks like a fellow Camry there in David Modespot was going to help him if he needed it, but looks like he might have at least maybe a little bit left in the tank to be able to do some burnouts here. It's going to be the third time he's going to win this season, and the third time he's going to win at a 1.5 mile track. And I'll tell you what, if you're looking for a non-playoff guy to really mix things up into that championship battle next week, look no further than the guy that right now is parked on the front straightaway here at Kentucky.
Yeah, he definitely said he's out of fuel. There's nothing left for James Cotto. But what a good job from him tonight. He's ticked every box. We were talking about it. Nearly won by a lap. He did a phenomenal drive. So, great job by James Cato, ticking all those boxes. And is he a factor that plays into things next week? Is having another car, you come to a championship race and you go, look, do I need to win this race to win the championship? Actually, no. There's another battle to play itself out on the track. So keep your eyes on that next week. Does James Cato play a factor just by being present in the race and in the race lead? All of a sudden, does one of those drivers just go, I've got to hunt him down, I've got to win this race, makes a poor strategy call, burns up their stuff trying to hunt down somebody they're not competing with? Keep that in the back of your mind for next week.
Well, not only that, but another thing that I'm also thinking of here as well, James Cato has proved in the last couple of weeks here in the playoffs, he's not afraid to go up there and mix it up with those playoff contenders. They've got their own agenda. He's got his, which is to go to victory lane. And, next week, if he comes out, has a strong showing, is up there at the front, does that maybe change up the strategy of guys like Robinson, Daniel, Lawrence, and Saucier, who we know have strong race cars when it comes to the 1.5 mile program, but do they decide, all right, I'm taking a little step back here. This guy wants to be aggressive. He wants to take this race win. I'm not going to be aggressive and try and battle him for it. I'm going to make sure that I'm focused on these three guys that are trying to take this championship trophy away from me.
No, but the factor for me that James Cato may play into this is, remember what we were talking tonight about that clean air? Is the clean air going to be a big factor? Well, all of a sudden, if you say Matthew Robinson's leading long segments of this race, all of those sorts of guys are right up there, and they need that clean air so that they can drive away from their competition. Well, they don't get it. James Cato is right there. If he's leading the field, all of a sudden you've got Robinson, you've got Daniels, you've got Saucier, you've got Lawrence, all competing with each other in dirty air. Is that the factor that decides this race? Matthew Robinson ran for a long period of time in that first green flag run at the back end of that lead pack. He didn't want to be there, and I think that's why he went to the alternative strategy. He recognized that he needed that clean air to compete tonight. He went for it. He broke up that lead pack. And look at the results that happened. We had 4 cars that were right next to each other on the racetrack for 30 laps. 35 laps. Then it come back to 3 for about the next 8 or so laps. Started a race, Matthew Robinson comes home in second. I think James Cato wins tonight just purely because he spent the bulk of the race in very, very clean air. He set himself up perfectly, gave himself a really good platform, he pushed from their homes. Great job by him. I think he played the strategy perfectly. But then again, like I said, does he decide the championship next week?
Both drivers, Cato and Robinson, had their strategies planned out coming into this race, never deviated from them, but you see there, nearly 16.5 seconds, over 16.5 seconds was the difference between the 2-stop strategy of Cato and the 3-stop strategy of Robinson. Good runs for J.R. Miller and Zachary Woods nonetheless, though, in 8th and 9th, but they're going to come up just a little bit short of making it into the Final Four. And then these were drivers that during the course of this completely green Kentucky race that ran into some issues. Jeremy Richmond had a speeding penalty. Chris Hubka had to pit late. Ryan Phillips had that that long trip to pit road we're not really certain what happened on his machine after spending a good portion of the race up at least inside of the top 7. And then Christopher Lawrence pulling his car to the garage area very early on in this race Didn't even make it to the halfway point, but did have enough points in the bank coming into tonight to ensure that he was going to be battling for the championship next week at Homestead Miami Speedway. So the final four coming into this race are the final four leaving this race. And we're going to get to talk to at least one of them here tonight. But first, we're going to be talking with a guy that's going to get his best finish of the season here tonight at Kentucky. Third place run for TJ Roberts in that number 11 machine. And, well, I thought we were going to talk with him, but it does not look like we have him available. So that's unfortunate. His best finish of the season, bettering his, I believe it was a 6th place run earlier on this year. So it's actually his first finish inside of the top 5, and it happens in a big way there with a big pass on DJ Daniel to snipe that third and final podium position. So we're not able to talk with him. So we're actually going to talk now with one of our final 4 heading into Homestead next week. He's the guy that won 2 of the 3 races leading up to the season finale, Matthew Robinson. And Matthew, it's Scott and Seth up here in the FRM booth. You got us?
Yes, sir. What's going on, guys?
Well, we talked about it. 2 drivers, 2 strategies coming into this evening. You were on the 3-stop strategy here tonight at Kentucky. Led a good portion of this race, but was there any moment that you had that 3-stop strategy going on that you thought about deviating it? Because we know with your 2 wins in the past 2 weeks coming to this race, you were mathematically ineligible of falling outside of that final 4.
Yeah, we were just trying something, trying to get a win. It was close there with everyone. A couple people actually were sputtering at the end there, and if they had a pit or they ran out of gas, we would have been in the catbird seat and took it. But it's just it was hard. It was hard here tonight with the arrow when you were behind people, and it was hard to make passes. So we tried something different, and it didn't quite work out like we wanted. But second place, can't complain. We were already locked in after last week, so we're just trying something different and have a little fun.
Well, that's what I was asking about. Was right throughout the broadcast was, is there any benefit in sticking to the usual strategy when you come to a track like this and you're locked in? Ultimately, I think in your position, I think you made the best call. Go to that alternative strategy. Pick the brains of all the drivers around you by just driving around them on that alternative strategy. If something presents itself next week, you're now one of the drivers that's in the best opportunity. If there's a caution at a weird phase of the race, if all of a sudden the car just starts falling off of the pace, you're really unhappy with the tires, you need to come down, make those changes, you're the driver that's now done that and still finished on the podium. So you've proved that it's possible. Does that give you strategy confidence next week?
Yeah, we definitely learned something tonight. We'll definitely do our homework for next week and see if we can do something different. Maybe the same thing. We'll see. Homestead is definitely a different track and more grooves there than it is here at Kentucky, where you can probably be able to pass more. But definitely looking forward to it, man. It's going to be exciting. This last race of the year. They with the new the way they do the points is pretty cool. I'm not sure who got in the final 4, but it'll be pretty interesting next week.
Matthew, I have to ask. Oh, go ahead, guys.
I was going to have. Normally, what we do, ladies and gents, is we actually ask 3 questions to our drivers, and normally it's split. Seth gets to ask them 2, and I get to ask them 1. I'm going to steal that opportunity again this week, Seth. I want to ask you: do you do anything different next week? How do you feel mentally? Do you feel prepared? And do you think that there is pressure given it's a championship race?
Oh yeah, definitely pressure on me. But I'm try to do the same thing I've always done. The whole year, try to do my best and stay out front if I can. It's gonna be really nerve-wracking trying to get it done next week, but it's gonna be fun. I'm gonna enjoy it, and however the outcome is, we had a fun year, had a good year, but we're gonna try to do the same thing. Just try to keep it, try to do the best what we think we can do to stay out front and win the race, win the championship.
I'm also going to deviate from protocol and strategy and say, Matt, do you think that there's anything else that you can do to prepare yourself for next week?
Well, I think just a lot of practice because this new update they had on iRacing, I'm not sure if they changed anything yet for Homestead but we'll go there and see and put in tons of laps, and try different lines and maybe do a couple of races just to get prepared for the race and see if we can take it home.
And finally, before I leave you be, DJ Daniel, you guys are on the same team. How do you approach this race? Do you split now? Is this the last race that you two work together? You shake each other's hand, go best of luck next week. Do you work together all the way up through until the race next week? Do you, and at that point you go, all right, may the best man win. What's the strategy there?
Yeah, man, we've been teammates the whole year, and I try to help him out, and he tries to help me out with in practice and stuff. So I'm definitely still help him out and not just turn my back on him. He's my teammate, so like you said, best man win after the green flag drops. So he's man for himself. I'm not gonna, I'd never really, besides maybe super speedway racing or something, maybe give him a little break here and there, but last race of the year, everything's on the line, so got to go out and get it.
Well, Matthew, no doubt about it. If we look at the final four drivers heading into Homestead and the driver that's got the momentum on his side, no doubt it's definitely in that 99 camp. Those 2 wins in the last 2 weeks, a second place here tonight at 1.5 miles, and the highest finishing of the final 4 drivers heading into next week at the 1.5 mile track here tonight. So certainly momentum on your side. It's going to be a lot of fun to see if we can close out the deal next week at Homestead. We're now going to give you the opportunity for some thank you sponsors and shout outs.
Yeah, gotta thank everyone at JKRM Motorsports. All year long, they've all Jeremy, Richmond, and Brock and DJ. We've all supported each other and just been a great group of guys all year. I'd like to thank Auto Ventures, Juniors Mobile Detailing, Main Street Auto Service, Matt Rob Cuts, all the sponsors that's helped us out, throughout the year, and hopefully we did a little something for them. With the way we've been running, but I'd like to thank Chris Lawrence and Chris Hupka with BackFire, and I'd like to thank y'all at Flatout Racing Network. Y'all do a great job, man. I love watching y'all's videos.
Well, Matthew Robinson, during the course of the season, he's hoisted 5 race win trophies. Next week, he'll look to hoist the granddaddy of all, that championship trophy at Homestead, Miami. Best of luck to you, Matthew.
Thank you, sir. We'll see you next week.
All right, let's go down to victory lane, where in his 1.5 mile starts, he's a perfect 3 for 3. The driver of the 3 car, James Cato. Hey, James, it's Scott and Seth up here in the FRM booth. You got us?
Yes, sir.
Well, man, I'll tell you what, you have burst onto the scene. I'm going to continue to call you Mr. 1.5 Mile because you add another notch to your belt here tonight at Kentucky. 3.5 mile tracks, 3 wins so far in your limited career in BackFire sim racing. Next week, we've got Homestead. We'll look to see if you can maybe go 4 for 4, but talk about tonight. Looked like you had the strategy played out here. You were going to split this race into 45 lap intervals, never deviated from that, and had the whole field almost a lap down at one point. That car was fast.
Yeah, man. I figured, especially after we went 30, 40 laps that first run, that we was probably going to have a long green flag run, if not probably the entire race. So I knew strategy was going to be key, and I didn't know it to be a fact, but I just figured that the time that you would make up off having the fresher tires off doing a 3-stop, I just didn't think that you'd be able to make up the time that you lost. So I knew that 45 was that magic mark to get there. Might have to save maybe a half a lap, a lapish to make it work, just depending on how hard you got to race. But yeah, man, that was a blast.
Well, James, proving that good things come in threes, 3 on the card, 3 wins at 1.5 miles. you go into the final race of the season with good prospects being at another 1.5 miles as well. Does the championship playoff scenario even factor? It's nothing that you're there and that you're directly fighting for, but does it still factor into your decision making next week?
I mean, not really. Honestly, I forget about the championship and the big battle for the playoffs during the race just because I'm not in it. So, I mean, I'm not there thinking about points. I'm just thinking, let's go out and try to win the race. I mean, definitely going to race everybody clean. Like, I mean, no matter what the situation was, I'm always going to try to do that. But it never even crosses my mind during the race. But it's gonna be a fun battle. Hopefully, I can think to pay attention to that championship battle next week and enjoy watching it.
Now, obviously, we know that you've got 4.5 mile wins if we also count in the All-Star race, but kind of a little bit of motivation into next week as well. 6 races so far this season have been run at 1.5 mile tracks. DJ Daniel won the first 3. You've won the last 3. Next week's the tiebreaker between you two. So what do you think? That give you a little bit more motivation heading into there to try and close out the season with back-to-back victories?
Yeah, man, for sure. I mean, anytime you kind of take a title, even if it's just bragging rights, like you want to do it. And even just, I forgot about the All-Star race, but like you were saying, 4.5 miles, definitely want to shoot for the 100% and try to make it 5 for 5. So you never know. It's going to be a long race, probably going to be pretty intense at times. So I'm going to try my best and hope for the best.
Well, we look forward to watching you see if you can go a perfect 4 for 4 next week in that season finale. Congratulations on your win here tonight at Kentucky, and we're now going to give it the opportunity for some thank you sponsors and shout-outs.
Yeah, I'd like to thank, once again, Zach and David for letting me on the team. Zach, especially, I want to give him a shout-out because he had a good surge here at the, I think it was at Bristol. Before Bristol, he was like 13th in points, and he fought his way up there, and he was in contention all the way down to the line tonight. So definitely want to give him a shout out. Buck Kicker, Blackgate, Splash and Go Graphics, AJ's Hot Shots, Sim Shots, Junior's Mobile Detailing, JKR Motorsports Auto Ventures. Everybody puts the league on. You guys for putting on this fantastic broadcast, and Grand Home Furnishings for sponsoring the car. I know it's a little weird seeing 3 on a Toyota, but hey.
Well, that 3 on a Toyota, it's in victory lane. So James Cato, he's your winner here tonight at Kentucky. Once again, congratulations. Best of luck to try and close out the season with a 4th win next week at Homestead.
Hey, thank you, guys.
Seth, normally at this stage of the broadcast we'd be closing things out. I just took a look down in the waiting room. Do you see what I see? There's a guy down there I definitely want to talk to.
Well, I'll tell you what, you were talking about kind of skipping protocol, and this is a race. This is a league race. But this okay, granted. But still, we can't just leave it at one of our final 4 drivers going next week. Unfortunately, we can't talk to Saucier here tonight because he was not in tonight's event. But I'd say we deviate. We talk to not only DJ Daniel, but also Christopher Lawrence because we got to know the mentalities of these guys going into that final 4 battle at Homestead.
Can we talk to them both at the same time? Because that is deviating from protocol.
Ooh, I don't know if they really want to give away too much to each other.
I think it's a good opportunity. How many times heading into a final week do we on a broadcast team get to talk to 2 drivers that are in the playoff 4 at the same time? This opportunity is not going to present itself again, Seth.
All right, well, it's your brainchild. If it fails, then you take the responsibility. Let's give it a go. Let's see if we can talk with both DJ Daniel and Christopher Lawrence. 2/4 of our final 4 going into Homestead next week. DJ, Christopher, you guys got us?
Chris jumped back out. I think Chris is a little bit busy, so we got DJ.
Okay. I believe we do have DJ. So DJ, first off, congratulations on advancing into the Final 4. Things a little bit hairy after last week's race at Iowa. You came into this race the cutoff flying driver, but I said it here tonight. I think I sound like a broken record. You did what you needed to do here tonight, a 4th place run, and now you get to laser focus on Homestead Miami next week.
Yeah, man. I was pretty nervous coming into this race. I didn't know what was going to happen, but My spotter Brockton kept me calm the whole time. I almost got third, so I got the wall coming out of 4 one good time, and TJ, I think it was, slipped right by me and snagged it.
Long race tonight, long green flag runs. A lot of information that can come away from these sorts of races. You saw Matthew Robinson take an alternative strategy. Here's your teammate. How much data are you going to grab from him after tonight's race? How are you guys going to break it down?
I'm about ready to pick his brain for Homestead. He's pretty quick there.
Ooh, is
I
that
was
what we needed to know about next week?
just like I was just talking to James Cato. I was telling him it wasn't me throwing Hail Marys this time. It was Matthew throwing Hail Marys.
Well, mate, look, I mean, it's playoff week from here on out. We talked to Matt, and he said, look, I mean, it's work with him all the way up until green flag drops. Is that the same mindset that comes out of you as well?
Yeah, I mean, I like to do most of my learning during the race. I really don't do much practice until race day. I like to learn from everybody else. Like, I'll get behind Matthew and run behind him for a little bit. My other teammates, Jeremy, Brock, all of them.
Now, DJ, I got to ask you because, I was talking with James just moments ago. At the 1.5 tracks that you guys have run this season, you won the first 3. He's now won the last 3. Obviously, going to Homestead, we know he's going to be a force to be reckoned with. So does that kind of change up the strategy in battling for the championship next week? Do you go into Homestead with the mentality that the car that wins the race is going to win the championship, but now adding Cato into the equation, do you now actually just focus on where the other 3 are around you and just focus on being the highest finisher, maybe not necessarily focusing on victory lane?
I really think that's what it's going to come down to. I feel like James is going to have quite the run there. Yeah, just focusing on them mostly and just focusing on myself. Don't make any mistakes. Don't get the wall. Obviously, we're all going to be running the wall there. That's the fastest place to run. Just keeping the nerves calm and,
Well,
Seth,
DJ,
yeah, go ahead. I'm about done with it. I think that solves all the questions. I mean, it's only going to resolve itself next week on track, and that's all we can ask for.
no doubt about it. Well, DJ, obviously, the best of luck to you next week. Congratulations on advancing into that Final Four, giving it a 50% chance of a JKR car going to championship victory lane next week. And maybe we'll also see you be able to break that tie between yourself and Cato for most 1.5 wins this season. Maybe close it out with a race win and a championship win. But for now, we're now going to give the opportunity for some thank you sponsors and shout-outs.
I want to thank Rocco's Sign Shop, Junior's Mobile Detailing, Matt Rob Cuts, Nationwide Homes, obviously JKR, my team, and Max Graphics. They've supported me all week, every week. Want to thank my family, my mom, my dad, my sister, brother-in-law, everybody for coming out here and supporting me every Friday night.
Well, DJ Daniel, he is going to be one of your championship 4 next week at Homestead Miami Speedway. Once again, best of luck to you, DJ, and congrats on a good run here tonight to secure that spot in the championship battle next week.
Yep, thank you guys. Have a good night.
All right, so I believe that Lawrence is continuing to do some admin duty, so maybe what we'll try and do next week, we'll see if maybe we can pick the brains of the other 2 championship competitors, maybe pre-race, Lawrence and Saucy, or see what their mentality is just mere moments away from taking the green flag at Homestead Miami Speedway. But it's interesting, too, because you look at this playoffs run to the season finale. You had, obviously, the unpredictable super speedway of Talladega. You had maybe a couple more cautions than we necessarily needed at the short track last week at Iowa. Certainly shook things up coming into tonight, but then we ran clean and green here tonight. Never saw a caution make an appearance in this 135 lapper, and it really just came down to who had the best strategy.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like the drivers said, Kentucky is very, very difficult to make the overtaking moves here at Kentucky. So you got to be there. You got to be quick. Actually, it's not Saucier. Saucier is not going to be running in the playoffs next week. It's Kyle Gartner.
Wow.
So Saucier is going to rue that opportunity.
I'm guessing that the admin thing that was going on there with Lawrence, it was the calculating of those points to find out who those final 4 drivers are going to be. And so Corey Saucier is out. Kyle Gartner is in. With that being said, what do you say? Do we dial up the 49?
Oh, I want to talk to him next week. I want to get his brain. I want to pick it then, because right now I'm pretty sure he'd be sitting up there extremely shocked and amazed that he's in, but he did absolutely everything he needed to do tonight. I mean, we talked about it.
I was looking at it as well, when you were talking about Kyle Gartner back during the midway portion of this race, if we were looking at the overall point standings, if we're not looking at any of the playoff points or anything, he right now is the highest driver in the point standings that does not have a win, 5th in the overall standings. So the consistency is there. Don't sleep on Kyle Gartner next week.
Yeah, that's a really interesting statistic as well. So I think the best opportunity next week is do exactly what we said we're going to do. Talk to 2 drivers prior to the green flag, and Chris Lawrence, obviously he's got his head down. He's working things out right now. Kyle Gartner, I think, is up there actually assisting. I don't think he's necessarily up there and talking to the admins. Penalty this, penalty that, driving standards. I don't think any of that's happening. To be perfectly honest with you, I think they're calculating and making sure that they've dotted their I's and crossed their T's, or crossed their T's and dotted. No, wait, crossed their I's and dotted their T's. Yeah, that one. Cross their I's and dotted their T's.
Made sense to me both ways, so I'm not sure really what that tells you. But so the final 4 are going to be Christopher Lawrence, Matthew Robinson, DJ Daniel, and Kyle Gartner. So it's basically a JKR versus Rebel Racing shootout next week at the Homestead Miami Speedway. That should be a good one. And obviously, as mentioned too, the only driver, if you want to call him maybe the Matt Crafton of the Final 4, Kyle Gartner, does not have a race win so far this season. Man, it could be a big one if he takes the checkered flag next week and wraps up the championship as an added bonus. But certainly looking forward to that one. We obviously know there's going to be some other dark horse drivers that are going to be up there mixing it up with our championship 4, but should be a good season finale next week at Homestead, Miami, if tonight's 1.5-mile race at Kentucky is anything to go by. Scott, it's been a good one under the lights in the Bluegrass State. Appreciate you joining me.
Oh, man, it's been a phenomenal... for a green flag race to have that much to talk about, how often does that happen, eh?
Absolutely. Well, thank you all for tuning in here tonight as well. We hope that you guys join us next Friday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time when the green flag will wave on the season finale. A champion will be crowned at Homestead Miami Speedway. For Scott Rankin, I'm Seth Cole. Thanks for joining us here on this Friday night as you've been watching the broadcast courtesy of the Flatout Racing Network.
This broadcast is the copyrighted work of Flatout Racing Network and may not be rebroadcast, retranslated, or used in any form without the express written consent of Flatout Racing Network and iRacing.com Motorsports Simulations. Flatout Racing Network would like to thank you for your support, and we hope you enjoyed tonight's broadcast.